Hello, I'm Harsh, and here's our team present. We are going to present our review on the book The Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. So let's talk about the authors first. This is Friedrich Engels. So Friedrich Engels was a German philosopher, historian, political scientist, and a revolutionary socialist, born in 1820 in Prussia. Okay. Engels developed what is known as Marxism together with Karl Marx. So he was a good friend of Karl Marx and they both developed Marxism. He, along with Marx, wrote the book The Communist Manifesto, which we are going to discuss today. And this book inspired a generation of people. He was a good he was a good friend of Karl Marx and translated many of his books after his death, and which included Das Kapital, which was also a revolutionary book and introduced the idea of communism to the general people. So he rested in peace in 1895. So here's Frederick Engels, next author. So this is Karl Marx. So Karl Marx, I don't think he needs any introduction. He was a German philosopher born in Prussia in an ethnic Jewish family. After graduating with a doctorate in philosophy from University of Java in 1841, he worked for a newspaper which was ultimately banned by the government. He used to work there as a editor. He met Frederick Engels in 1843 in Paris and they wrote the Communist Manifesto. He moved to London and wrote Das Kapital, which introduced a new theory of human society, and Karl Marx finally died in 1883. So this is Karl Marx, quite famous personality. This is a copy of the book. The Communist Manifesto was first published in 1848 and it is one of the most influential political documents ever written. So this book is about the negative impacts of capitalism and how the system ultimately needs to be thrown away by a new form of human life, that is communism. So the book argues about forcefully throwing away the existing conditions as written here. It is divided into four parts, one preamble and a short conclusion.
Manifesto. Uh, Let me give you the journey of this manifesto as we went through the manifesto. We came to know about this manifesto was a result of great thinking by Karl Marx, oppression of working classes by huge industrialists led to this manifesto. The preparation of this manifesto was assigned to Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels at Congress of Workers League in 1847. In this, we have shown the journey of Karl Marx as a writer. As a writer, he wrote numerous of articles in newspaper uh, and numerous journals in newspaper opposing Prussian autocracy, which was a kind of dictatorial and towards common people. But his radical thoughts was being continuously rejected by the government of different countries. Uh, so uh, then he went to France. There also he worked based on these theories of communism. But same as in Germany, his these all these radical thought were rejected by the government. So in this, we have mentioned that finally Karl Marx went to Brussels and there, with the help of Friedrich Engels, began his work on communism. And this ideology slowly gained popularity and slowly it spread to different countries from Europe, like Russia, China, Cuba, Laos, etc.
Bourgeoisies and proletarians. From ages, oppressor and oppressed have been given different names: freeman and slave, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman. But their story remains the same. These two groups stood in constant opposition to one another and carried on an uninterrupted, open, or hidden fight, which resulted either in reformation of society at large or in common ruin of the contending classes. With time, the epoch of the bourgeoisie has simplified class antagonism by splitting society into two great classes directly facing each other: bourgeoisie and proletarian. Next slide. The modern bourgeoisie is the product of several revolutions in the mode of production and of exchange. The development of the bourgeoisie began in the towns when the manufacturer could not meet the growing market and increasing demands. This led to the Industrial Revolution, and manufacture was replaced by modern industry. Industrial middle class by industrial millionaires, the modern bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie did not consider sentiments and emotions and reduced family relation to mere money relations. Next slide. The shift to large-scale modern industries left the small tradespeople, shopkeepers, handicraftsmen, and peasants in a miserable situation. They could not compete with the large capitalists and gradually sink into the proletariat. The proletariat movement was the independent movement of immense majority in the interest of immense majority, a national struggle. Next slide. It was evident that the bourgeoisie were unfit to the ruling class in society, as the modern laborers were sinking deeper below the conditions of existence of his own class. Therefore, bourgeoisies are own gravediggers. Its falls and victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable.
Proletarians and communists. As we move towards the second chapter, the author basically deals with the communities, proletarians and bourgeoisies in the first chapter, and now he wants to define a contrast between the proletarians and communists. So basically, here the author also gives a overview of the manifesto and talks about the points that he argues are very well suited for the developed countries, and they would form a very nice society in which everyone has equal rights and equal opportunities also, and all the things which are not good in the capitalist system according to Marx, that all would be removed. So he quotes in the text that in the nationalist struggles of the proletarians of the different countries, they point out and bring to the front the common interest of the entire proletarians independently of all nationality. So basically, this is a point of difference between the communists and proletarians. The author suggests that proletarians are divided by nationality and mutual competition between them, due to which, whenever they come together and fight against the common enemy, that is bourgeoisie's rule, they are actually deviated very cleverly towards those who are enemy for the business classes only, like the remnants of absolute monarchy, the landowners, non-industrial bourgeoisies, and petty bourgeoisie. So basically, proletarians think that they are fighting against the bourgeoisies for their own interest, but actually are very cleverly put towards the enemies of bourgeoisies and used by these people. So, secondly, the author also says in the various stages of development which the struggle of the working class against the bourgeoisies has to pass through, they always and everywhere represent the interest of the movement as a whole. This is something which shows that the communist people are generally well educated and have a long run view in themselves. So basically, they can see the interest of the movement as a whole. The immediate aim of the communist is the same as that of all other proletarian parties. So basically, this shows the similarity between the ends of proletarians and communists, but the first 2 points shows the difference between their management. So, as we have talked about that, the first slide for this chapter showed how the proletarians and communists were different from each other. The second slide here shows that what are some of the points, some of the basic points that the author argues are pretty generally applicable in developed countries for establishing a socialist or communist society. So these are some of the points. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. The heavy progressive or graduated income tax. This is something which is also applicable nowadays in India. So basically taking high pay from rich and less from poor, a system which is generally used to establish equality in economy. So this is some of the major economic ideas which Marx proposed. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. So basically, one of the basic and one of the most debated arguments of Marx was about the right to inheritance. Basically, he wanted to abolish family rights. So, according to him, this was a way to equality in the society. Confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels. Then he talks about centralization of banks, centralization of credit system. So all the things are in the hands of the state. Equal liability of all to work. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Next slide. Further, Marx talks about extension of factories and instruments of production. This is some of the basic economic policies. Uh, he was in favor of industrialization. He liked that the people should work at their full potential for their country, because actually everyone takes whatever he gets from his company only, from his state only. And then combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. So basically the primary sector is joint with the secondary sector. Free education for all children in public school. So education can no doubt be considered as one of the basic pillars of any society. So abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. These were some of the policies set by Marx to gain a high economic growth rate in the country, applying socialist systems.
In the third section of the book, Socialist and Communist Literature, Marx described the types of fans of socialism and communism. According to him, there are diverse preachers of this holy idea due to their numerous intentions and goals. He broadly divides them into three major parts: reactionary socialist, conservative or bourgeois socialist, and third, critical utopian socialist and communist. Next slide. Reactionary socialists were anti-capitalist but not proletariat supporters. They either wanted their old prestige and status to support their lords or without looking at the history of bourgeoisie. Marx further classified them into three main classes: feudal, petty bourgeoisie, and third, German or true socialist. Feudal, they were the ones who did not want the rise of the modern bourgeoisie because they want to enjoy the powers they were possessing. Their chief issue was that this type of society would create an unsatisfied proletariat, which would further uproot all the old system. Second, pretty bourgeoisie socialist. This class was once a part of the bourgeoisie, but eventually lost its status and merged with proletariat. They successfully showed the contradiction of the modern production system through various media. They were quite successful in presenting their ideas, but gradually lost support and faith from the followers. Third, German or true socialist. According to Marx, for them, the French Revolution was nothing more than a practical reason to remove and alter the system. After the revolution in the West, the ideas of socialism and communism entered German via France. Nevertheless, German philosophers and intellectuals approved some of the French socialist and communist ideas without actualizing that Germany did not share the same social position as France. Next slide. Conservative or bourgeoisie socialist. They were bourgeoisie without a proletariat. They want bourgeoisie without a proletariat. They aim to weaken the powerful upcoming force of proletarians to stabilize their position in society. They want the proletariat to keep its vulnerable role and stop hating the dominant bourgeoisie by accepting their dominance. Third, critical or utopian socialist and communist. This class was supported socialism and communism only for the sake of society welfare, not for any personal interest. But their ideas were very fanciful and hence they were tagged as utopian by Marx. They wanted to establish a cooperative society as a whole to satisfy community needs. Robert Owen was one of this type of thinker who established a small village in America naming New Harmony to demonstrate this idea. However, it was not proved successful in more extensive area of action.
The fourth chapter is about the radical movements going over at that time and how youth need to be induced in this revolution. So, like this line, the communists disdain the conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that the ends can be only attained by forcibly overthrowing all the existing social conditions. So, this shows the communists are quite convinced and extreme about their ideas. So, these are some of the contemporary revolution going on in Europe at that time, in Switzerland, in Poland, in Germany, and in France.
Principles of Communism. Engels wrote two draft programs for the Communist League in 1847 in June and October. The later one was first published in 1914, known as Principle of Communism. It was decided in June 1847 to issue a draft of Confession of Faith for the discussion to the sections of the League. The document which has now come to light is almost certainly this draft as the comparison of the two. Engels wrote two draft programs for the Communist League in 1847 in June and October. The later one was first published in 1914, known as Principles of Communism. It was decided in June 1847 to issue a draft Confession of Faith for the discussion to the sections of the League. The document which has now come to light is almost certainly this draft, as the comparison of the two documents shows that Principle of Communism is a revised edition of this earlier draft. Next. The new draft was worked out by Engels on the instructions of the leading body of the Paris Circle of the Communists after his sharp criticism of the draft program drawn by true socialist Moses Hess at the committee meeting on October 20, 1847. Engels expressed his views considering principles of communism as preliminary draft in a letter to Marx that it would be best to draw up a program in the form of manifesto. At the Second Congress of Communist Leagues, Marx and Engels defended their views on the fundamental scientific principles of communism and thus drafted a program in the form of the Manifesto of Communist Party.
Commune or the city council has a great importance in the history because this mass movement opened a new path of socialism and communism in the world. The Paris Commune was a movement that was started by the France workers which established a short-term government for a short time. It was a mass revolt by the workers. Next slide. Various social, economical, and ethical reforms occurred due to this in the whole world after this movement. Some of them are shown there. One interesting fact about this commune is the red flag relationship with the workers was associated with the Paris Commune, which became the symbol of red flag in the workers' movement.
Coming towards the end of our presentation, um, after going through the manifesto, we came across some of the interesting questions uh, like can elimination of social disparity, social oppression of the lower slab come through the some changes or some revolution is required. So according to us, elimination of social disparity come in a long term on its own, or we can do some changes in the government through amendments. Uh, Coming to the next question, that what archetype of society works well for the human world? So according to us, a perfect society is one which give people liberty, equality, justice, democracy, as well as prosperity. So, our third question is communist an ideal theory, or it is considered as a total failure? So our discussion landed us on the fact that this theory sounds good, but its implementation on the ground level is difficult. Communism had good intention when it was conceived in late 19th century, but it can never be properly applied in complex economy, competitive world, and so forth. So all these answers are mentioned in group's claim in our term paper. So coming to our last question, that what are our views on communism in Russia and China, and is pure communism led to their development? So communism spread in Russia and China initially with an aim to remove class hierarchy, but slowly they were seen to deviate from Marx ideology. For example, during initial days in China under Mao, the Communist Party obtained control in 1947. But after Mao's death, further leaders followed less the ideology of the earlier leaders. The current, the current constitution was created in 1982. It includes many civil rights like right to own private property. So we can see that they were deviating from communism. So uh, pure communism didn't lasted for long in in these countries. Uh, so this is our end of the presentation, and as mentioned in the term paper, pure communism is not a good choice for present scenario. Rather, mixing of some of the essence of capitalism and socialism helps a society to prosper. And this is our acknowledgement.